This video is about the first steps of restoring the roof of our old house. Here a view of the attic as it was 4 years ago. Let's have a closer look at the roofing tiles at first. The northern side of the roof is covered with handmade tiles in a so-called double covering, where each tile covers the gap between the two tiles in the row below. But the southern side has only a so-called simple covering, with much wider spacing of the tile battens. This makes the roof lighter but requires wooden shingles in between the tiles, which have to be replaced every 10 years or so. But this is the ideal covering when the tiles are uneven or distorted, as the handmade ones often are, and the tiles don't crack so easily. I will keep these old tiles and cover the roof with them again, but at first the battens and tiles have to be removed. This will be done step by step. The middle of the southern side has seen the worst damages, so I opened it first and set up a temporary roof, which gives me access to the rotten parts of the rafters. The original idea of this roof was to form a triangle from this rafter, this floor joist, to the other side with this rafter, upwards to this point, and this big triangle will make the roof stable. Only this. But this depends on these points here and here, where the rafters join into the floor joists. If these points aren't stable enough, the whole structure will give way. Especially when the beams, which are meant to link the rafters together, are cut away. To understand this better, let's have a look at this cross-section. The most simple approach is to assume that the rafters are forming a stiff triangle with the floor joists, but in fact it's much more complicated. First we have to accept that the joints aren't stiff but act more like hinges. Then we find that the function of the collar beams isn't clearly defined. When the rafters bow under load, the collar beams provide an outward force against that. But when the joints of the rafters with the floor joists are loose or the floor joists are damaged, the collar beams pull inwards, which case we have in fact often remains unclear. Much depends on whether the collar beams are supported or not, and how they are supported. In this case here I assume the supports to be able to glide horizontally. If the collar beams are supported properly with beams that run lengthwise along the roof, they can act a bit like purlins in a modern roof, even if they weren't meant to do so in the beginning. In a medieval roof, these lengthwise beams only had to link the rafter triangles together, but every triangle had to be stable on its own. In a modern roof, the rafters are supported by load-carrying purlins at several points. We can now see a possibility to handle old triangular roofs that are partly damaged. Just put an additional purlin on top of the collar beams, support this purlin properly at suitable points, and fix everything you want to this purlin. This method also makes it easy to repair the usually rotten lower parts of the rafters. Let's look at these parts now in reality. And again, I don't know what keeps this house upright. Before I could bring in the new purlin, I had to lift the already sunken in roof a bit. In the middle I lifted it about 20 centimeters. Then I was able to cut away the bowed and damaged old beam under the collar beams. I prolonged the central posts of the staircase and attached the new purlin sideways with M20 screws. Because the roof isn't straight, I had to make the purlin in two pieces that are joined together on top of a newly inserted and hopefully stable wall. The left part here in fact wasn't necessary for holding the rafters. I will need it for attaching additional floor joists for this upper level of the attic later. And I realized at some point that the protruding part of the gable was mounted on only two very small beam heads, so it occurred to me to run the purlin through the gable to give it additional support. So the first and most important steps to repair the roof are made. I'm facing the repairs of the many damaged details now.